welcome to another episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today we have Marco Ieni, who is the creator and maintainer of a package called Release-plz. Well, I guess you would pronounce it like that, but it's PLZ. Not to be confused with another tool called Release-plz, which is spelled Please. Is that right?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Why don't you give a quick introduction about kind of, who you are, and then we can start to talk about the Release-plz tool, what it is, etc.
Yes, absolutely. I'm Marco Ieni. I'm a long-time listener of Rustacean Station. So first of all, thank you for all your work. I really appreciate and I enjoy every episode. I'm a software engineer at Prisma. I've been using Rust in production since November 2020, more or less. And I think almost 2.5 years ago, I started this tool, Release-plz, to help Rust developers to publish their crates more easily in a safer way and to just make releases seamless.
That's interesting. I wanted to talk more about this. So the Release-plz spelled like how please should be spelled, and the please like you spell PLZ. Now, the Release-plz, is that a Rust port of that tool, or it's a totally different tool? They just happen to share the same name.
Yeah, I can explain maybe a bit the story of how I started it. So I was at my previous company, TrueLayer, where we had some open source packages that we wanted to publish to crates.io, create tags and stuff like that. And we used the cargo release, which is a great tool. But the issue is that we were using it from the terminal, from the CLI. So like everybody needed to have access to the crates.io. And we had like internal documentation on how to request access. Like it was a bit painful to get it set up. And also we are used to continuous deployment. So like releasing from the CI and so on. But to release our crates to crates.io, we needed to run cargo release or cargo publish from the command line, which it wasn't ideal. So I looked up online to find alternatives. And in particular, I found Release-plz, which was discussed by Faster Than Lime in one of his articles. And so I tried it out. So Release-plz is a tool that is compatible with many programming languages, and it allows to create a release PR where it bumps the next version of your crate. It bumps also the changelog. And then when you merge it, it creates a git tags of all the packages that it updated. And so I said, great, let's try to use it for Rust. But there were some issues. So first, I don't know why I spent 4 hours or something trying to get it working in a normal cargo workspace, but I couldn't make it. And I got like an error, no such file or directory, something like that. And it wasn't really clear. And I looked up, there was an issue and nobody was replying. And I think that we as the Rust community, we deserve more. And then there were some issues because since this tool is agnostic to the programming language somehow, like it supports many programming languages, it doesn't know what a cargo registry is. So like when you want to integrate it into your projects, you need to commit some configuration files such as what are the crates that I want to publish, what are the current versions of these crates. And like I said, we already have all this information in cargo.toml, crates.io. And so I decided, well, it's a good time. Let's try to rewrite Release-plz, but it wasn't a rewrite like a code side by side. I just took the functionality that I wanted and I adapted it and I optimized it 100% for Rust. And so when it came to the name, I said, okay, is Release-plz, Please, maybe let's call it PLS. But I chatted with my girlfriend and she said, well, it's too similar PLS, so at least call it PLZ. And so, yeah, at least there is the Z, which is different from the S. But still the pronunciation is like the same. And I experienced it in the first place when, for example, I talk about it at conferences or meetup. That is very hard to say, compare the two, like Release-plz and Release-plz. So that's why I emphasize that Z so much. Yeah, so this is where the name comes from.
Okay, there's kind of a lot to unpack in there. So it's like Release-plz, but more geared towards Rust, right? Can you talk more about the specific features that are for Rust compared to what Release-plz had before?
Yeah. So basically Release-plz, so my version, it has some difference with respect to Release-plz. First, it requires no configuration. So the two configuration files that I told you for Release-plz, they are not needed. And the way I want Release-plz to work is that you can git clone any Rust project and run Release-plz on it, and like it should work, no questions asked, with the same defaults. And I introduced the configuration file maybe 1 year after I released the tool. So like at the beginning it was like no configuration file, everything works well enough by default, but of course people started asking customizations and so on, so I introduced the configuration file, but by default it works as you would expect without any configuration file. Then other differences is that Release-plz, the original one, doesn't run cargo publish for you. Since it supports many programming languages, you need to handle cargo publish when the git tag is created. And it can be hard because in a workspace, you can have certain packages that depend on others. And so you need to run cargo publish in order, because first you need to release the packages with no local dependencies, then the ones that depend on them. So it's a like direct graph. And yeah, you need to resolve it. And Release-plz does it for you. Maybe they will add such feature in cargo itself. So like you can do, I don't know, cargo publish dash workspace, something like that. I think this effort is in Google Summer of Code. So hopefully we will see it upstream in cargo. But for now, yeah, Release-plz supports it. And there is another big difference with the Release-plz. So both these tools, what they are great at is that they suggest the next version of your crate. Instead, with most of the other tools available in the ecosystem, you need to say, I want to bump the patch or like the minor or the measure. And so you have this cognitive overhead to decide what's the next version. And both these tools use conventional commits to determine it. So like if you have new features, they update the minor version. If you have like a bang in your commits, it means that it's a breaking change. And so both these tools use conventional commits to bump the version, but there are many differences. So first of all, Release-plz, the original one, it requires that you use conventional commits. If you don't use them, it never creates the release PR. And so basically it never updates your project. It's useless. So it forces you to use conventional commits. Instead, Release-plz always creates a release PR, bumping the patch if you don't use conventional commits. So like conventional commits are optional in Release-plz. Plus, Release-plz integrates cargos and ver checks. And I'm very happy that you have Predrag here before this episode so that people are already familiar with this amazing tool. And yeah, basically Release-plz runs cargos and ver checks on all your libraries to determine if there is a breaking change. So like even if you don't notice that you committed breaking changes, then in the release PR, for example, if you are on 1, 2, 3, the next version will be 2.0.0. And so you are still on time to like revert the breaking change before releasing to your users.
I was doing some research about these conventional commits. I didn't even think that this was even something, right? When I was reading it, I saw the word conventional commits and I'm like, all right, I don't know what a conventional commit is, but I guess that means any kind of commit, but it's actually a standard, right? Do you mind to talk a little bit more about that standard? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's just heard about this if we're listening to the podcast now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a standard that lets you specify what kind of commit you're doing. For example, if you are updating the documentation, you can prefix, I think, you like to docs and then column and then the commit name. So there are other types. For example, new features is like fit, column. So basically you prefix the commit message with this prefix that tells you what type of commit you're doing. And if it's, for example, a feature that introduces a breaking change, you do fit, then bang, and then the commit message. Yeah. So it's a way to specify, again, what changes are introduced in your commit, and it integrates very well with the Semver specification that we use in Cargo, because, for example, you should update the patch, so the last number of the version, if you have like bug fixes or chores, so small changes basically. Then you should update the second number, which is the minor of the version, only if you have new features. And you should update the first number, which is the major, if you have breaking changes. Many crates, including Release-plz in the Rust ecosystem, are F0 as the major version. So in this case, everything is shifted by 1 to the right. So basically the first always remains 0, the first number. The second one, you only update it if you have breaking changes. And the third one, you update it if you have new features or chores or fixes. This introduces some confusion, yeah.
Okay, that sounds interesting. I do like this style. I'm just thinking like, how we usually work. What usually ends up happening is, you make a change. You didn't run any of the tests locally. You let the CI do it. Maybe you're in a rush or something. You push it, and then maybe because sometimes we run formatters, right? So we have to ensure that the code is formatted. If not, it'll break the CI. We have to ensure that the tests pass, or else again, CI breaks, right? It doesn't pass. If you need to make a change, like fix, you're making a feature, you push it up, then the next commit, you have to make a change to fix either the formatting or fix the tests from breaking. Is that a chore, or would that be, it's not really a fix necessarily, right? That's what's just confusing me if we're going to follow this kind of style.
Yeah. So the way I work usually is that I work with GitHub PRs, right? Or like any Git hosting service. I have a PR where I usually push my changes, and usually I don't care too much about the commit message of the commits in the PR. So for sure, I'm not doing feature, introduce these small things and then fix for run cargo format, stuff like that. I only care about conventional commits in the PR title. And then usually I squash merge. So the entire PR is just one commit. Usually if you care about the commits of your PR, maybe you reorganize your Git history and you force push. And so if you care about every commit, then yes, you need to have conventional commits for every commit. But it depends on how you work and how much you care about your Git history. I was saying that the reason why I changed the default behavior of Release-plz in my tool is that sometimes I forget to use conventional commits, and I think it's totally normal. And so if these tools should help us and not become too much strict and so on. So maybe you just use conventional commits when you have, a new feature or a breaking change, and then you don't use them for all the rest. Yeah, I think we should be flexible in this case.
Okay, that would make more sense to me because sometimes, a feature would be multiple commits. So if you were to use Release-plz in that way, it would be a little bit confusing, no? If you kept saying feat, something, feat something, but it's actually part of the same feature. It sounds like you'd recommend saying, okay, when you go to merge this in, let's do a squash feat and then the name of the top level, this is what this feature is, rather than every single commit in between, right?
Yeah, it depends how you work and how you want your changelog to look like, and also, of course, your Git history. Basically, the way Release-plz work and also Release-plz, the original one, is that for every commit that you do on your main branch, it opens a release PR or updates an existing release PR. And every commit, then it appears in the changelog. So every commit message to do is reported to the changelog. So if you use squash merge, if you squash your PRs, or if you have multiple commits for the same features, it's up to you. It depends how you want your Git history to look like and how the changelog should look like. Yes.
Okay, that makes much more sense. I'm just trying to get the flow in my head and based on how we currently work. And we did start introducing squash, so this sounds like this could fit in. So that makes sense to squash merge, right? When you do something like that.
Yeah, I can tell you a bit. The flow when you use Release-plz from the CI is like that. You do your normal work, you open PR, you merge them, open PR, you merge them. At some point you say, okay, I want to release. So you go in your open pull requests and you see that there is a release PR. This release PR, it will tell you what is the next version of your crate. So this is the PR body. The PR description is current version, next version, and then the report of cargo server checks in case there are breaking changes. Then usually I go to the files changed. So I see what changes the PR introduces, and you will see cargo.toml, where it bumps the new version of your crates, again, based on conventional commits and breaking changes. Plus, you see all the changelogs, which contains the commits that aren't released yet to crates.io. And then when you're ready to release everything, you merge the PR, and then you wait for CI to run cargo publish for every package, create the git tag, and create the GitHub release. And the GitHub release will contain the changelog of each package, basically.
Okay. There's some more thoughts coming to my mind. Like sometimes when you have breaking changes, you want to show people how to upgrade, right? How to use the new style. And so that would be another commit. So that would actually probably add another line to the changelog, which maybe you don't really need, because if this is just in the changelog, it's kind of not really important. So like before you release, then do you have a chance to kind of take a look at everything that's been added so far? Then you can make any adjustments that you want?
Absolutely.
So that way you're not kind of locked into, okay, that's something I was thinking about.
Yes. So the release PR, basically you can push changes to it, and Release-plz won't update it unless there are new commits that come too. So in that case, there is a race condition. So when you want to release, you stop merging PRs, you focus on your release PR, and you edit it. So the way you edit, you can do like, instead of, for example, you can change the version that Release-plz suggested. So you can edit your cargo.toml files and change that version. Or maybe, of course, you want to add more context to the changelog, or maybe you want to add more files, stuff like that. You can add all the changes you want, and then you merge it, and then Release-plz will merge what you have in your main. Yes. So, of course, if you want to provide more context to the changelog, more often the commit message alone is not enough. But I think that having a precompiled changelog for you, like a draft of the changelog, it's easier than like crafting it manually by yourself. Yes. So I think it's useful to have like this draft, and then once you want to release, you check out the PR locally, you edit it, you push your changes, and then you merge the PR.
Okay, that's good to hear. I mean, it sounds really, really good for what it gives you. Is there anything about the Release-plz that maybe you're not so, let's say, sorry for the pun, but pleased with? That's something that maybe you want to adjust to make it maybe more versatile, or something that is really hard to work around?
Yeah, there are many open issues with many improvements that I would like to do. But what I described to you until now, it works fine. There are some improvements that I want to do. For example, some maintainers asked for an easier way to make changes to the release PR. Let's say that Release-plz suggests 1, 2, 3 as the next version, and instead you want to update to 1.3.0, for example. Then at the moment you need to git check out locally the PR, edit the cargo.toml manually, and then push the commit. I would like to have the possibility to edit the release PR by writing commands to GitHub PRs. So like in the PR itself, you write a command saying Release-plz set version 1.3.0. And in that case, reads this commit and edits the release PR, so that you truly don't need the terminal to release your crates, which is often the case, but sometimes you need to do some manual changes. Then some people really want to edit the changelog like always. And sometimes at the moment this is painful because, again, you need to check out the PR locally and edit the changelog manually. What I have in mind is you do like Release-plz edit changelog, and then from your laptop you edit the PR, because like what happens when you do Release-plz edit changelog, Release-plz will identify the release PR and will open all the changelogs that you have in your favorite editor. So like if you have the editor variable set to Vim, for example, it opens into Vim the first changelog, you do your changes, and then you save, and then it opens the next changelog, next one. After you're done, it pushes this commit. So like, yeah, I want to do some changes so that it's even easier to and smoother to run releases. Then there are some more advanced use cases. For example, I had one maintainer who said, hey, I have like a big Rust monorepo at my company where many teams maintain different packages. So I want to introduce Release-plz for my team. I don't want to introduce it for all the crates there. And also, maybe I want to release my packages, not all the packages. So one release PR basically is not enough because I want to release different set of packages at different times. And so there is an open issue to support crate groups so that you can have separate release PRs for different crates, basically. So you have, I don't know, 3 groups of projects, maybe 1 group for each team, so that each team maintains his own release PR. And when they merge it, they only change a small part of the whole cargo workspace. And also, like right now, Release-plz supports GitHub and Gitea, which is an open source version of GitHub. I would like to support also Gitlab. So if anybody wants to help, reach out. So like the main part is done. It works well, I think. There are some improvements and like minor issues that I would like to work on. Yeah.
Actually, I never even heard of Gitea. It's interesting too. So I'm learning a lot today just besides the Release-plz tool.
Nice. Yeah, I can talk about Gitea because like I love it because GitHub is where I put my open source packages on. But Gitea is awesome because it's like you can run GitHub on your laptop. And having a tool that needs to run PRs, create GitHub releases and so on. The question when you say, how do I test it? It's hard, right? Like I don't like writing tests that reach to public internet because then I cannot work when, for example, I'm on a plane or stuff like that. And there are other issues, of course. So ideally, I want projects to work offline. And Gitea makes it really easy. So what I do for integration tests, I do like Docker run Gitea. And so I have like a Git hostings server on my laptop. And so I point Release-plz to it, and then like it opens PRs, it creates releases. And so I have tests that are like initialize a new crate, run Release-plz release PR, assert that the PR is open, assert that the changelog of the PR is like that. And then what's even more cool is that you can have a private cargo registry inside Gitea itself. So Gitea works both as Git hosting and cargo registry. And so like I can run a Release-plz release and have my crates published to Gitea and download them and assert that they've been published. So like I can test locally without the need to have crates.io or GitHub. It's awesome, yes.
That's interesting. I have to take a look at it. It seems really, really close to GitHub. The CI is similar to like Actions, it looks like.
Yeah, the CI, it's a new feature. At the moment, Release-plz doesn't have a Gitea action. If anybody wants to contribute, is welcome. They also have the CI, as you said, yes. And basically, all the REST API are very close to GitHub. Like that's why it's easy to support it if you already support GitHub. Like there are some few changes in the GitHub API that I needed to do in order to support it. And so like it was almost a no-brainer. Yeah, actually somebody from the community added API to support Gitea and like it was so useful for the testing story. Instead Gitlab, I'm not that familiar, but I think it works differently from GitHub. For sure, like the API are totally different. So to add support for GitLab, I'm waiting for someone from the community to say, hey, I'm familiar with GitLab. And so we can work together on it.
I use a lot more GitLab for my projects because I just find it easier to work with. The CI stuff that they have is more customizable in terms of like you can just start writing like run this bash command, stuff like that. For the actions, I haven't looked deep into how to actually make a GitHub action, but I'm guessing it's probably not too difficult because it looks like somehow you have GitHub actions working, right?
Yes.
So it can't be like crazy difficult, you know. No offense, I'm just saying like if other projects can put it, then I probably can do it myself too.
Yeah. So GitHub Actions are like they are challenging, I would say. Yes, on many levels, on different things. Basically, you have 3 ways of creating GitHub Actions. One is by using Docker, which was how I created the Release-plz action at first. Then you can use like JavaScript or TypeScript. or maybe like you can use even shell scripts and stuff like that. Yes. And plus now they added also composite actions where you can define GitHub actions as a composition of other actions, which is really handy, which is the approach that I use now for Release-plz. And I switched from Docker to this new way of running Release-plz because with Docker, I had to specify the operating system where Release-plz was running, the cargo version, everything. Instead, with composite actions, the user, when they say like runs on Ubuntu latest or when they do Rust app nightly or stuff like that, they use their operating system, their cargo version. And so like it's more flexible. And if you have a Rust project, basically what you can do is in your GitHub repository of the Rust project, you publish the binary there. So you compile the Rust project and you publish the binary. And from your GitHub action, you just download this binary and run it. I use a GitHub action that downloads the binary for the right architecture, plus it puts it into your GitHub actions cache in the cache of your users so that after they download the binary once, they don't need to download it again. So it's fast, actually.
Yeah, I was just looking. You do have a section here all about releasing binaries. You were saying that it doesn't release binaries, but then you also give an action, I believe, for actually how to release a binary.
Yes. So at some point, I opened the GitHub issue and said, hey, we should also release binary because at that point, you cover almost all the release cycle, right? You publish to Grades.io and also you publish the binary. However, I think it's too opinionated to release binaries in just one way. There are many things that you can do to release binaries in a certain way or not. And at the same time, new tools to create binaries were coming up. For example, the most recent one is Cargodist by the company Axo, which they not only create the binary, but they only create installation scripts for you and stuff like that. So I decided to avoid writing the logic to create the binary Release-plz, and instead I want to provide nice ways that you can attach your favorite tool, basically. And the way I create binary Release-plz is by using a GitHub action. That's what I provide in the documentation. So basically what you can do is Release-plz will create a tag on every package that it creates. And in the GitHub actions, you specify a workflow that runs on tag. And so on every tag, you build a binary and you publish it to the GitHub releases, for example. Yes.
The question is now, are you actually using Release-plz to version and release the Release-plz?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a big believer in dog fooding, and like Release-plz is as good as it is because I use it in Release-plz itself, yes. I'm the first one experiencing the issues of using it, and so I fix them as soon as possible, yes.
Now I'm kind of curious, right? At what point was Release-plz enough to actually start using it as part of the workflow of Release-plz as you're building it?
So at the beginning, I would evolve the Release-plz so that you can use it both from the CLI and from the GitHub action. The first thing that I built was the Release-plz update command that locally it updates the cargo.toml and the changelog. So it's basically the same files that you have on the PR, but you have locally. And so you can like commit and push it to main. And this is what I was doing at the beginning, like running Release-plz update and pushing to main. And then I was using other tools to do the rest. For example, publish to Grades.io, git tag. So for example, you can use cargo release for that. And by the way, this is something you can do today. So you can just, for example, use Release-plz to update your crates, and then you can use other tools to release them. Or on the contrary, you can update your crates manually and you can use Release-plz just to release them. So by the way, at the beginning there was just this Release-plz update. Then I introduced the release PR command, which is like Release-plz update, but it opens a PR. And so at that point in Release-plz, I had my PRs that I was merging, but still when I merged them on main, I was using other tools to release them. And then at some point I said, okay, let's try to integrate some existing tools into Release-plz. The issue is that cargo release, cargo workspaces, they are just binaries. They are not libraries. I didn't find a good way to integrate them well in Release-plz. So something that I didn't plan, I created a new command, which is Release-plz release, which takes what you have on main and creates the tag, runs cargo publish. And so at that point I was like feature complete, yes. I could use Release-plz how I wanted it in my use case. And like for me, Release-plz was perfect at that point. Like I didn't have other features requests for myself. But then since other people use the tool in different ways, for example, they want just one changelog for all the workspace instead of one changelog per crate, then I added support for that. They want to disable Git tags or they want to customize the Git tags name, all sorts of issues. Now we have configuration files, which is like very, very long. You can customize the changelog shape. By the way, I use Git Cliff by Orun to create the changelog. So now probably it supports different use cases, yes.
I think there's just one last question that's in my mind about the Release-plz is because, some of us are still have to work on Windows or even for Windows stuff. I've seen that, if you look at the installation part of your documentation, you talk about Arch Linux, you talk about, shell completion. How is the Windows support on this tool?
Yeah, so I don't use Windows myself. I publish the Windows binaries on GitHub Actions releases, so you can download them and run them. It should work on Windows CI in GitHub Actions, in theory. Let me know of any issue if you find any issues. The Arch Linux is packaged by Orun, which is doing a great job for packaging Rust projects on Arch Linux. For Windows, what you can do is either run cargo install Release-plz, which is going to take a lot of time because you are compiling Release-plz. There is a great tool called cargo binstall, which works cross-platform on Windows, Mac, Linux. So it's called the cargo binstall with the B in front of install. What it does is instead of compiling your crate, it goes into GitHub releases and downloads the binary. It has some logic to identify what's your architecture of your laptop, and it finds the right binary for your laptop. It unzip it and it puts it into your path. So it works the same way as cargo install basically. And so you can use cargo binstall to install Release-plz or any other Rust binary very quickly on Windows or any platform.
Has there actually been any Windows-specific issues that you've run into or no?
Not that I remember. When I was using the Docker GitHub action, there was one person from Mac that they had the GitHub Actions that was running on Mac because it was a Mac-only Rust program. And they said, well, when I use Release-plz to publish, cargo publish is failing because you are using Ubuntu for your Docker image, but cargo publish doesn't work because my crate doesn't compile for Linux. So what do we do here? And so that's where I shift to using GitHub Actions in a composite way so that if you need to run on Windows or on Mac, I run on your operating system as users would expect, yes. Yeah, regarding the Windows, I think it should work fine, yes.
Okay, because I always hear most package maintainers and so forth, that when I talk to them, they've always had to have a very hard course in oh, wow, Windows is totally different compared to all the other OSs I usually work with. And it takes them a while to figure out. And there's always, somebody who's failing something in some version of Windows that they have to kind of dig into and figure it out. And it could be painful, but it's good to hear that it's been rather smooth on your side for supporting Windows. So that means that I guess the packages are agnostic enough about the frameworks that you don't have too much of an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I have one package which is in my dependencies, which is specific for Windows. It's called Dunce, Dunce, which it should help with Windows paths, which are a bit weird. So this package will sanitize your path to work also on Windows paths. I saw that it was used for other stuff, and so I included it in Release-plz as well. Probably the main reason why I didn't have many Windows issues is that I think Release-plz is mainly used from CI, not much locally. At least that's my understanding of the tool. Maybe not many people are using it on Windows because on CI you run like on Linux most of the times, yes.
Makes sense. I guess it depends on your company and stuff too, because I'm just thinking back when I used to work in a corporate bank. That was super weird because we would develop on Windows, but we would have to somehow deploy on Linux, which to me was just kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we had to build quite a few features where with a flag like, if on Windows, do this. If on Linux, do that. Or, this kind of stuff. And it was just like, why can't we just work on the same platform or at least some kind of POSIX compliant platform? Because this makes life so complicated.
Yeah, maybe now with Windows subsystem for Linux, the story is a bit better.
Well, that depends corporates, right? They're slow to upgrade and you have to make your case and you have to get verified, especially if you're working in finance, right? So many steps you have to do. You have to think like, why can't we just do that? But I understand that there's a lot of stuff involved with this and it's hard to do. I don't have any more specific questions about Release-plz. Is there anything that we missed about it that you wanted to say? Because otherwise I have one last topic that we should go into.
Not really, just a call to action. If you want to make releases more smoother for Rust maintainers, reach out to me. Like the Release-plz code base is very friendly. I try very much to not use complex generics, stuff like that. I try to keep the code base as simple as possible so that new contributors can get up to speed. Hopefully it's simple enough. Like it's not perfect, of course. I don't have infinite time to work on it. But definitely I'm able to help if you want to contribute to Release-plz.
All right. Then I just wanted to quickly get into one more thing before we head off. You're doing a podcast, right?
Yes. Last year I started a podcast called RustShip, which, it's just a podcast where I interview other Rust developers to talk about what they do, mainly in their open source projects. So, for example, I had Orun as a guest who maintains, hundreds of things, including many Rust projects. I had Ellie, who talked about Atwin. I had Pedrag, who talked about cargo server checks. Yeah, and many other guests. And I have fun. It's not as regular as Rustacean Station because, I also maintain Release-plz in my free time, but I try to do one episode per month. That's my goal.
It does take a lot of effort to find, the time and do all this stuff. So I understand that publishing every week, which I try to do, is not easy. But luckily, I've had enough people in the Rust community who are actually open to talking that actually, at one point, I had like 2 or 3 month backlog of episodes because I was releasing one a week. And it was kind of nice. But yeah, now we got to do the backlog again. And I think I got to almost everybody in the community I could that I'm aware of and could get to. But yeah, I really want people to come check out your podcast. So it's RustShip. I think you're also a video podcast too, right? So you do post to YouTube or?
Yeah, the podcast is recorded live. And so I go live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter or X. Yeah. And after that, I edit it to remove all the parts where me or the guests goes offline because it happens all the time, unfortunately. And then I publish it a few days later if I manage to all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on. And then if I really had time, I also try to extract some clips to post on social. But yeah, it's so time consuming. Yes.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I have a team I can kind of depend on to do most of the work. I do, my own side, which is not always easy, is to find the guests, schedule, record, and then finally pass it off. I do posting of the episode, which takes some time, and then anything else that happens in the production. But yeah, I understand. Luckily, like I said, I don't have to do all of the editing, which I know is painful. That's not my strong suit. So that's why I asked somebody else to do it for me.
Nice.
So I can understand that it does take time.
Yes.
Awesome. It was great to have you on, Marco. I like the tool. I'm pretty interested in it. And it's interesting that you're also using cargo server checks. Makes perfect sense. Hopefully this will give you a bump in usage and see, more feedback. And maybe we'll have GitLab integration at some point because that looks interesting to me. Thanks again for coming on, and hopefully I'll have you again in the future.
Thank you, Alan, for your time. I'm a big fan of your podcast, so thanks a lot. Yes.
Thank you.